Okay, so I just wanted to welcome everybody to our Tech Talk today, talking about the Internet of Things. We've had a huge response, lots of questions. Um, we have this nifty IoT T-shirt we're going to give away to some of the selected questions that we've had. We've had an overwhelming response, so we've got more questions than we could probably get to. We've got Holger here, Holger Reinhardt, all the way from Germany, so he's joining us through Skype.
And I think I'll just quickly say, you can tweet questions live to the hashtag Layer7Live. You can also email them again. It's techtalk@layer7.com, and then just chat them in the window. But we've got so many questions already. We'll do our best to get to every question, but be patient. And Holger is going to do his best to answer all the questions that everybody has. So thanks a lot, Holger, and I'm just going to turn it over to you to sort of introduce yourself and introduce the topic. And thanks so much for being here, Holger. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I realize tomorrow's a holiday, so it's like Friday night for you. So thanks so much.
Well, it's Friday night because it's already what 7 p.m. and 6 p.m. my time. So I'm Holger. Joined Layer 7 at the beginning of the year. Have been working or looking at the IoT space for close to 1.5 years now. Official titles, I don't really like them, but what I'm doing is I'm working with a core development team, and I'm also working as a business developer in the M2M IoT space for Layer 7. That's me. So let the questions start.
Okay. So we like I said, we got lots of questions. Some of them sort of overlap, and one of the main themes people are interested in is why IoT, what's all the hype about, and then basically what's the difference between M2M and IoT. Why don't we start there?
Well, so you want to start with the M2M versus IoT?
Well, maybe IoT. Why IoT? What's all the hype about?
Well, our industry lives by hype, right? I mean, we need another term to kind of feed the media and our imagination. But what it really is about, right? I think it's IoT. Really, what it means is it brings together all the different trends we have in technology for the last, almost a decade. We have service-oriented architecture, which allows us distribution, and we have cloud, which allows us essentially unlimited compute power. We have ubiquitous connectivity, which is crucial for IoT or any kind of connected device. We have big data, and we can actually start to make sense out of big data through big data analytics. We have commoditization of hardware. If you look at the Arduino and the Wi-Fi sets, etc. So you have all those different trends, right, which kind of ran in parallel. Cellular didn't really have to do anything with compute until, pretty much now in the M2M case. And they all kind of come together now, and you see this kind of explosion in what you can suddenly do when you build in connectivity into things. And then ultimately through connectivity they start to become smart because they can tell you, you can kind of add context awareness to a lot of things, kind of a context aware layer on top of how we perceive or how the machines are perceiving the world. So that's kind of IoT, like in the big scheme. What's the difference between M2M and IoT? Actually, the answer I'm going to give you is actually not one I came up with. It was, there are people out there who can phrase that much more beautifully than I can. This is actually on the IoT LinkedIn group. Someone essentially said that M2M, what you have to imagine is essentially a bunch of silos, right? Functional silos. And M2M is the first mile, getting the data from the sensors, from the probes, into those silos. Right, and that's the world as we know it today. And then within that silo, you run big data. You try to analyze. You try to use that data, and then so it's a vertical. M2M is essentially a vertical way of getting data from where it's being generated to where it's being processed. But then you have IoT, and IoT really is horizontal. It's connecting the different silos with each other and correlating the data in all of those different silos. And I don't think we're at that point yet. I think when people right now talk about IoT, they really, what they mean is M2M. And then I think what our role is as technologists is to look ahead and think about, so what do we need to do in order to enable that horizontal integration of data from different sources so that people actually can correlate that data and create new business model, new business services. Does it make sense?
It does, and I'm hoping, we just had a little comment that I just wanted to double check that everybody can hear us okay. In the chat, somebody just said they didn't hear the question. I think it's pretty obvious that Holger was trying to answer the difference between MTM and IoT, but I just wanted to shout, just double check that. Okay, you can hear Holger, but you can't hear me. I wonder if that's ever.
Well, now I can't hear you. If you say something, I can't hear you right now.
Okay.
Oh, there you are.
Back.
Super quiet. We'll turn it up.
Okay, so it's just maybe a little bit quiet. Maybe I just need to get into the mic a little bit more. Sorry, Holger. I didn't mean to.
No problem.
Should be fine right
to
above.
ruin your rhythm, but so
Bring it on.
sorry.
Bring it on.
Okay, so how about can you discuss some of the technical underpinnings of M2M and IoT?
Yeah. So. Yeah, actually, you can. This is pretty much the content of my last blog entry, which you can find on our Layer 7 website. Remember, right? IoT being the horizontal kind of data integration, which is on top of silos, or it's kind of horizontal, perpendicular to the vertical stovepipes, data stovepipes which we have today. So. And that doesn't exist yet. I mean, we're 2-3 years out before I think we can kind of start seeing. So people kind of understand that there's this potential and they start playing around with things. So it's a very amorphous, heterogeneous world where people kind of do the first initial steps on how we can do that on an internet scale. What we do have today is fairly well understood mechanics on how to get that data into those into the silos, those M2M protocols. And what we have there is a battle shaping up between obviously HTTP REST as kind of the default. You have IBM pushing MQTT, which they just got standardized, which is a pub/sub protocol for telemetry. You have CoAP, which is a separate. It's also being standardized by some organization. I forgot which one. And then you have a very interesting entry in for protocols. It's XMPP. XMPP seems to be very popular for specific use cases, and which maybe we can talk about it a little bit later. But it seems to have. Remember, XMPP was really built for decentralized chatting infrastructure, but there are. It has characteristics which make it very appealing for IoT or M2M kind of applications. So it's pub/sub, MQTT, and its cousin. I think there's one from AQMP as well. There's HTTP REST. There is now I'm losing my thread. What was that? CoAP, and there's XMPP. Those are kind of the major ones, and then you have a slew of other ones, more narrow ones. There's Nano IP. There's SCADA for industrial, etc. But the four ones I mentioned first, those are kind of the big heavyweights right now in the discussions.
Okay. And I think that actually addresses one of the questions we had. So we're just going to move right on to another question that we got through Twitter from Guillermo Todd. Sorry if I'm butchering your name. I know, and he's from Alaska Airlines, big fan. So he asked, and this is API related, with so many things potentially accessing APIs, given the Internet of Things, all things connected, what are some strategies for securing APIs across such a breadth of consumers. So I guess you can imagine a scenario where there's so many different things connected. What are some of the strategies for securing those APIs?
And I think each of those protocols I just mentioned has a very specific or very different kind of security characteristics. So XMPP has a very explicit security and provisioning model. HTTP REST has, the well-known optional security semantics. MQTT, as far as I understand, has very little on security. So it really depends on what kind of protocol you're talking about. I mean, if you're talking, I think the one thing to realize is, right, IoT or M2M is not anything, it's not rocket science, right? I mean, it's stuff we have done for the last 20, 30 years. It's distributed architecture just on a massive scale.
Right.
And so in security, I think it's just simply good enough security for the use case you have. I do want to say one thing. It's probably not going to be, IoT is probably less transactional and more eventing. There's actually a very interesting article or proposal just out, which would add an event processing style to RESTful APIs. So, and once you kind of go away from a transactional model towards an eventing model, right, you also have different security semantics there.
Right.
So I guess, to kind of give a shorter answer rather than me just blabbing on, it all depends. There is no overwhelming strategy. I mean, just essentially apply what you have done so far and just use that knowledge and apply it to the best of your abilities for good enough security.
At massive scale.
At massive scale, yeah. So the question, of course, is there was another question which I saw earlier. Someone was very specific. He said, well, is SSL enough, or should we require HMAC, HMAC header to do message integrity or message? And I'm kind of thinking, most of e-commerce uses SSL at this point, and SSL really is not like SSL only works on top of TCP, right? The moment you step away from TCP, SSL won't necessarily work anymore. And then the question really is, can you actually, there's really no hard and easy answer. It's just, all I can say is, based on my experience, is, build good enough security in there, but don't try out something completely new, because most of the lessons we have learned so far are still applicable to IoT.
Okay. We've got a comment or a question through the chat too. Mist nickname. Can you discuss a sample of eventful versus transactional?
I wish I would have read that paper. I just tweeted about it yesterday. Michael actually just published it or just put a note up on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I think yesterday. You can find it on my tweet. I've mentioned it in my blog entry. Maybe Steve, you can kind of in the chat just simply broadcast the message to the latest blog. I think there are some interesting links there.
Sure.
So if you're interested in protocols and I think also in comparison of the security profiles of the different protocols, go to that blog entry and look at some of those link resources there.
Maybe Jose, you can just chat a link to Holger's latest blog entry. They can have a quick look. Alternatively, Holger's Twitter handle, I believe, is at HLGR360. Does that sound right? That's
right.
Yeah. So if you want to follow Holger, and I think he's tweeted a link to that article. It's at HLGR360. And you can probably find that article there on his Twitter feed.
Just send him the blog post link.
Yep. Please. We'll just put.
We'll
just actually put a link to that your blog post on the Layer 7 blog in the chat window, and people can just link to it right now.
And
Okay.
actually, I know that Mike Amundsen, who is one of our API evangelists, was very interested in that proposal. So I'm looking forward to talking to him about what he thinks about this. So maybe that's also something we can then share with a larger audience at some point.
Sure. Did you? I mean, I know earlier on you touched on REST a little bit. We do have a couple of questions that are. How will API discoverability work with the vast number of things, especially if we see REST as the primary communication style? It's another one from Guillermo.
Yeah.
So maybe just talk about REST a little bit, if you can.
About REST? Whoa. Actually, there was another question which asked about the levels of REST and how they were applicable to IoT. And I was actually stumbled over that one a little bit because I didn't know about different levels of REST. I quickly Googled it and came across this very interesting article from Martin Fowler, who essentially introduced, and it was again a blog post from someone else, 3 levels of REST. I mean, there were resources, verbs, and then hypermedia.
Right.
And I also saw hypermedia showing up on some of the other questions.
Yes.
So again, it's on my tweet. You can grab the link from there. Essentially, you have at the bottom you have the resources. You model everything in resources. Then you use verbs to kind of create a common operations on top of those resources. But then I think that things really become interesting when you add hypermedia on top of it, so that the API starts to become self-describable. You can kind of the client, if the client is written in the correct way, it can self-discover how the appropriate response is, and I think that kind of leads into this whole discussion. When we talk about intelligent things, right, we're talking about physical things mostly, and physical things have a different lifetime than software. Most of those things are maybe even you cannot even update them, right? So whatever API client you put into them, chances are it will be very resilient to change, which makes this whole notion of how do I design the API on the other end such that it can grow without breaking existing clients in the field, makes it a very interesting challenge to resolve. And I know Mike would probably very much point to his latest work on hypermedia and self-describable APIs.
Yeah, Holger's referring to Mike Amundsen, for anybody who doesn't know. He's our, I think, our API architect, basically. And so Holger's talking about Mike Amundsen, and if you want to follow him on Twitter, he's at MAMUND. So when Holger refers back to Mike, he's talking about Mike Amundsen, who talks a lot about hypermedia APIs. So
I think
if you want to do some more research, that's a good place to start. Sorry, Holger.
Yeah, so I think REST APIs with hypermedia are part of the answer. I am struck a little bit by that question about discoverable.
Right.
To me, discoverable can mean a lot of different things, right? Do I assume that the sorry, I just always have to move my cursor here to get the screensaver disappear. Discoverable means, does the thing kind of searches for someone who wants who it kind of wants to interact with, or does discoverable means it can kind of live with version changes of the API? I think version changes of the API we just talked about, hypermedia probably in the REST world is the way to go. I think there's a very interesting challenge around identity and things, right? There's on one of the email discussions I read, and actually refers to another question: how do we measure the Internet of Things? And someone made this great slogan or a great sentence: everything with an identity will have an API, and everything with an API will have an identity.
Right.
And I can't really say that I kind of fully comprehend, but there just seems to be in that something in that statement which seems to make sense, but also points out to, if we really talk about trillion and trillion of devices, then we have a lot of identities we have to manage.
Right.
And what distinguishes my things from your things, right? And with identity comes like data domains or ownership domains, and that I think is a place which is totally uncharted territory, right?
Yeah.
And I think, you know, maybe I can use that to kind of lead in one direction, which I'm really thinking a lot about, which is, let's assume that the definition of IoT as a horizontal data integration across silos is really correct. And let me make that example. Let's assume you have home automation, maybe Digital Life of AT&T or some other telecom vendor of your choice. Wouldn't it be cool if you could take that data of all your sensors and give it to, for instance, a security company for 2 weeks when you go to the Caribbean to your vacation, right? So they can monitor your apartment in your absence.
Right.
You can call it security as a service or whatever. But then when you come back, you have the assurance that all the permission you gave to those folks to look at your data or to your sensor data kind of reverts back to you, and no one else is looking at that data again, right? So there needs to be a very strong identity and data access management model around IoT in order to make it work. If I'm not confident that I can share my data in the scope I defined it, with the person or with the group of people I defined it, then I think IoT will just be this pie in the sky, because no one will really want to share data, because they potentially open a backdoor into their system and have someone kind of siphoning off data which they didn't want to share.
Okay.
So, but Discoverable, I think, has a lot to do with both the versioning of the API and the identity of the thing or the API you talk to. So I think there's this notion of identity, which, you know, what's going to be the DNS of the Internet of Things. I think that's I see some academic papers on that, but I don't think anyone has cracked that yet.
Okay. I'm just going to scroll back up. There's been some comments in the chat. And thanks, Matt McClarty. Looks like he posted a link to another discussion on hypermedia. So thanks for that, Mike. Going back, we've got a specific question. Do you have any suggestions for users who want to write TCL scripts to control RESTful APIs?
No.
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 Okay. And then another comment from Adam Bianco. I guess. Anyway, he's making a comment about REST, which seems to be one of the themes people want to talk about. I mostly see around REST services for IoT specified through HTML documentation. But is there any effort/standard towards using a kind of WSDL file to entirely describe the REST service?
Yes, I mean, and I would assume, you know, it's WADL. The WSDL equivalent to the WSDL equivalent of the SOAP world is WADL in the REST world.
Right. Okay.
WADL. You can just Google that.
Yeah, WADL. Okay. Sorry. I've got a couple questions also about the audio. Somebody's having some trouble. Let's go back to some of the questions that were submitted.
Did you get to Carol?
Not yet, no. Yeah, and if you're in the stream and you're watching, listening, and you've sent in a question and you're waiting, we're going to try to get to them all. I think Holger and I had a quick look, and not all of them were necessarily IoT related. So we're gonna try to get all the ones. And anybody who was obviously just trying to get a T-shirt, I know the T-shirts are awesome, but if you just kind of half-assed a question and just to get a T-shirt, we're going to know, and we're not going to ask it. So we're trying to get to everybody's questions, and the IoT ones, we're going to get shirts, so we'll go offline afterward. Matt, do you get a shirt? I don't think they come in your size. So, okay, doesn't OUID satisfy the need for identities, Holger? That's another question through the stream.
UUID or OUID?
OUID.
I don't know.
Oh, so he's saying organizationally unique IDs. Sorry, O, not U.
Whatever. I mean, I can start Googling it.
Yeah.
I'm aware of UUIDs, but you know, again, how do I distinguish my thing, my toaster from your toaster?
Right.
So am I have to set up the toaster and type in, I don't know, do like a 2-level authentication to claim that toaster? Do I have to do an OAuth on that toaster? I don't know.
Okay. Sorry, somebody said we've missed a question on combined values. Okay, sorry.
I'm just looking at some of the questions too here. Yeah, go ahead.
What is the combined value of big data and IoT? That's a good, massive question.
Big data and IoT. I think they all depend on, and again, I mean, I think IoT is almost more a term to describe what's ultimately a data sharing, right? It's about, I think we need big data, or we have already big data, to, no, let me back off. Let me back off for a second. So I talked to a Gartner guy a couple of days ago, and he said, so, you know, big data is an all mouth, and so, but what are the real big data projects which are out there? And they mostly are around customer interactions, right? They are you take as a retailer or e-commerce site, you take as much data from how that person moves in your store or on your site, and you try to kind of gain insights on how that customer interacts with that site. Why did he not buy this? Why should he buy this, etc. And this is where a lot of the big data comes in, is correlating data from different sources. You know, your tracking behavior, your click behavior, abandoning cart, did you click on that ad, etc.
Right.
Kind of creating a greater context about what you were doing. If I would just look at every single data track you leave on a site or in a store, individually, you know, it's all about, essentially it's a lot more guesswork. But if I kind of can combine more and more angles from which I look at what your ultimate purchase or not purchase was, I kind of can sense more about the context in which you made that decision.
Right.
And I think ultimately, that's what big data gives us. It's correlating massive amounts of data, filtering out the noise, finding patterns, finding trends, and then IoT, in my mind, you know, that's my personal opinion. It's kind of sitting. It's enabling that I can share the insights I gained in this one silo with the insights I gained in another silo, and kind of can create yet a much broader context or a new context out of it, which currently kind of sits confined within each silo. So it's all about driving more and more context awareness into the applications ultimately.
Yeah.
Does that answer it? Does that?
I think so. I mean, if you have a follow up to that question, just feel free to chat it through.
Yeah,
I see Matt McCarty is actually sort of helping out with the OUID stuff. Thanks, Matt. The questions are going. There's sort of a discussion in the chat going on with this OUID stuff.
Okay.
And I missed a question from Gene, so I'll just go back and ask Holger, can you speak to any advancements or technical groups working on overcoming tech privacy and security issues around IoT?
Well, that's a very, so there are two topics which I find very fascinating. And you know, remember, I'm sitting actually in Germany, working for a Canadian company. I spent a long time over in the States. My wife is American. It's fascinating to see what privacy means in the North American market versus the European market.
Sure.
So there is very little work that I'm aware of. Again, I'm just an individual scouting the web like everyone else. So there's very little work I'm aware of around privacy, etc., in the North American market. And usually, if we just take the trends, it's regulation kind of lets technology have its way until it kind of runs into trouble, and then regulation gets imposed afterwards. On the European side, it's the other way around. It's actually there is lots of material out there from the European Commission studying privacy issue on IoT. A lot of preliminary work without any technology there or any use case there. Just to give you an example, for instance, in Europe, or in particular in Germany, the data, I'm on a smart grid here. The data the utility collects about my electric usage is actually not their data; it's my data.
Okay.
And they have to ask me in order to use that data. So it goes down to that level that even though it's their sensors, it's their distribution networks, etc., but the actual data about my electricity consumption is actually my data.
Okay, that's interesting, because here I think it might be the opposite. I know there's a lot of
that's
smart
what I'm saying.
meter fear in Vancouver, especially.
So what I think if you want to kind of get really thinking about privacy, especially in that early part, just Google European Union privacy IoT, and I'm sure you will find lots of different hits on that. There was just, and again, if you go to my Twitter feed, I think maybe a month or two ago, they just published a white paper on that topic.
Yeah, lots of battles in Germany with Google and Google, the Street View and all that.
Exactly. Well, it's actually not just Germany. It's Europe.
Yeah, Europe
There's
for sure.
just a different. But I wanted to kind of use that. There is a very ambitious project, also sponsored by the EU. It's called the IoT architecture. It's a working group which maps all different types of IoT architectures as they are emerging. There's fascinating stuff there about protocols. Just Google again IoT-A, and that gets you to that site. And they have a lot of. If you just want to understand what's the current state of the art in IoT and IT architecture, that's a perfect site with lots of resources.
Okay, cool. I'm just going to take another question here. The stream has been busy, but I just wanted to address a couple of the questions that were sent in earlier. Let's see. Jerry Ruggiero, sorry if I'm butchering your name again, and I hope you're here. So Holger, he asks, where will the intelligence in the Internet of Things be? Will there be some form of on-site intelligence, so that basic functionality?
Yes, I love that question. I love that question.
Good, okay, I'm glad. So that basic functionality continues to exist in the absence of a connection, or will all intelligence be cloud-based? So that's an important question.
It's an important question, and I'm first going to answer that question, but I'm going to use it as a lead-in to another question, which I think is very interesting. So, I think the thing just probably, or most things, at least initially, exist for a certain purpose, right? Your toaster is there for toasting. Your coffee machine is there for making coffee. Your fridge is there to cooling your stuff, right? And it would be a tragedy, and I think a commercial failure, if your internet goes down and your coffee machine doesn't work anymore.
Right.
So in as far as the intelligent is needed to make the thing a useful thing, I think that will always be contained within that thing. I think what you will see is those things now getting added the ability to broadcast or share their state or share their data with another thing or some kind of higher level unit, be it the home gateway or some cloud service, formerly Patch Bay, now Cosm, something like this. But I think that will be an add-on functionality initially, at least, where you then can take state and their data and combine it with, again, with other state and data and do something useful out of it. If alarm clock rings, then switch on coffee, power up my heating system to whatever temperature you need to feel comfortable. If door closes, power down heating system, make sure all electric, the coffee machine is switched off, the stove is switched off, etc. So it's this connectedness, this sharing of state, which actually enables smartness. But guess what? Your connectivity goes down. You're not gonna. It's not gonna be the end of the world.
Okay.
Okay. So, but I think what that kind of a background to that question is actually something. There was a very interesting blog article about the model of the IoT. Is it like a hub and spoke system? All sensors kind of feeding into the cloud, into kind of some kind of central intelligence, making sense of it all, or is it actually something where you have nodes or domains? If you Google Internet of Nodes, you're going to find a very interesting blog entry where another Michael, he actually works for a company which does XMPP-based IoT gear. So he describes it as, and I can correlate to that as, IoT actually exists in multiple domains and multiple nodes, right? You will have one node, which is just, for instance, you as a consumer, which is your apartment, right? Your toaster, your fridge, your something. So then there is another node, which is the other apartment. And so the whole house is maybe full of apartmental nodes. Now, those nodes do not share, probably, most likely, given that this is all hypothetical at this moment, do not share data outside of your apartment. You don't want to have your neighbor know, when you switch on your coffee machine. Now, what can be shared between the nodes and kind of aggregated on the house level is maybe certain data about electricity patterns, right? And then each house kind of tries to balance it out. Maybe there you have a little generator or a solar cell in your solar photovoltaic system up in your rooftop. But then each house is its own node, right? Mm-hmm. And most of the data stays inside of the house, but then it shares certain subset of that data, maybe on a street or on a district kind of level, right? Allowing the district to optimize their things. So you kind of see this multi-layered islands of data where data is kind of contained, and only either if there's a exceptional situation, maybe a fire breaks out or something, data is being shared outside of that. And I think that kind of vision of an internet of nodes or internet of domains, of domains, I find seems to be much more practical and realistic than like this, I send all my data up into a central cloud and cross-wire it over there.
Okay. Quite a few more comments and questions through the stream. And we typically go around 45 minutes. So Holger, I know you maybe mentioned that we could go long today if you wanted to answer all these questions, because there's definitely a couple more that we'd like to get to,
yeah, sure.
to that we got from email. And then
it's Friday night, remember?
It's Friday night, right? Are you drinking a beer yet?
No, but I'm sure there's one out there.
Okay, so Harriman, H. Harriman, he says, I apologize if this is out of scope, but how about ever more intelligent parts of equipment? For example, rail track switches. So safety, a specialized form of security certainly is an issue. Yeah. This equipment seems to take the opportunity of the IoT. Is there a set of secure interfaces to communicate through? Think of monitoring, control, and eventual set.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah, no, I so main concern is again about security, right? And
yeah, safety,
right?
Security.
Rightfully so. I mean, you see, everyone probably saw the announcement, right? That certain non-governmental and governmental groups are probing the network, trying to find ways to take control of connected things, be it PowerPoint would be easy, power plants, I mean, railways, etc. I had yesterday a chance. I was actually in Switzerland, and the chief of the army staff actually gave a presentation on how Switzerland prepares their cyber defenses, and they said daily they were being probed, right? And to a point now where they have a national plan where they built in redundancies, and he had this. He shared a study that, Germany, I think, after 48 hours, most of the emergency generators would run down, and then you kind of start really seeing the chaos in society. So, point is, I totally agree with him. You know, the more connected we are, the more vulnerable we get, right?
Sure.
And you have to weight that against, whatever more efficiency we gain. And there is an argument to be made, is every efficiency gain really worth the risk we're taking, right? Squeezing out another, whatever, how many bucks I would squeeze out by understanding better how things work together, eliminating redundancy, because that's ultimately what it gets down to, exposes us more and more to a catastrophic failure where that redundancy would have kicked in but is no longer there. So it's a fair statement. I don't know. I think as a society we have to make that judgment call. There is no unbreakable system. I mean, I think the Israelis refer to it like as a layered security. And if someone knows about security as Israel, you just like an onion, right? You kind of put layer upon layer upon layer of security in place and hope that ultimately you can slow down any kind of attack long enough that you can either disconnect it or stop the attacker from happening. So I don't really have. There's no golden bullet. The only golden bullet there is to maintain a separate network which is completely detached from any kind of public resource. And actually, that's what the military is doing. That's what some of the critical infrastructure guys are doing, is to run separate networks which are not connected to the public. And to be honest, that's probably, for the real critical infrastructure, that's the right thing to do.
Okay. And Herman followed up saying, might there be a form of private IoT? Still requires the same set of interfaces. And thanks for your response so far. So he just wanted to comment on your answer.
Yeah. So same thing. I think the only safe net is the one net which is not connected.
Right.
And if you and to be honest, do I really need to have power plants connected on the public internet? I'm not quite sure.
Right, okay. And thanks again. Looks like Matt is making some comments through the chat as well. IoT will probably be two things: connected devices over the open web, or two, a set of protocols and approaches that come from this would be the basis of a private IoT, and there will be many. So,
okay. And I really, the one conviction I really have in this is that IoT is more about data sharing than it is about connectivity.
Right.
M2M is connectivity. I think IoT is about sharing data in a very frictionless way, which enables us to actually do new business model on top of data, which was ultimately previously locked down, like the example, like security as a service. If that data becomes shareable with a security company, they can come up with a new service model, new business model, which accesses those sensors which I approve them for, make sure that my home stays safe, maybe even are able to let a carrier drop packets into my hallway while making sure that he doesn't go off and stuff like this. And I think that's really where IoT kind of becomes interesting, is because ultimately IoT will only be successful if you find a commercial opportunity in it.
Sure. Okay. Moving on, I know we had a question. You sort of touched on this towards the beginning, but Carol Glennon sent in a question yesterday, and she promised if we send her a shirt, she'd wear it and tweet it. So we're going to ask you her question. So hopefully you're on the line, Carol, or on the stream. I guess that's an old term. But as we create API frameworks that interact with sensors and control objects in the IoT, so who and what are the best organizations to follow to learn about new protocols? I know you did talk about this a bit, that we should be preparing to handle, such as co-AP, etc., or co-app.
Actually, co-op is a protocol. I think
co-op. Co-op.
To get really a good overview of what's currently in the market, again, Google this European Union architecture group. It's called IoT-A, and you will find a pretty, based on my reading of it, a pretty comprehensive overview over current state of the art. There's different. I think there are a bunch of other groups which I should mention.
Sure.
There's ETSI, M2M, ETSI. We call it ETSI here. I don't know how you would pronounce it. M2M group. It's the European Telecommunications Association. There is a specific Eclipse M2M group. Remember, IBM is promoting MQTT as their protocol of choice for IoT. They are using the Eclipse group for quite some interesting work, to be honest. I mean, there's frameworks there. There's a lot of good work being done under the auspices of IBM. So you should check that out. That's definitely a vibrant community building up there.
Okay.
The XMPP extensions for IoT, again, on my blog entry, you find them there. There are some very interesting discussions going on in them, and you see a lot of knowledge in there. So, yeah, I think these are good starting points to look at.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay.
There's also a sub-discussion going on about the movie plots based on this IoT of things. So,
only worked on that.
Adam Obianco says, one more question if there's time. What technologies or languages are currently used to perform remote updates of software, API clients, into the Internet of Things, or the object of things, as he says?
So there's actually no. So how can I answer that? There is no language per se. There are frameworks, but actually a bunch of companies have sprung up which are servicing exactly that need. And so just to kind of. Again, let me draw the analogy to the mobile space, right? You have there's kind of the current thinking about device management of mobile devices, is pretty much what drives some of the thinking about device management in sensor devices. Look at the following companies. I'm going to list a bunch of them. There's Axeda, there's Exosite. There's Digi, there's Gemalto, or Gemalto, I guess, Gemalto. Those guys are, I don't even know how to call them. They're maybe M2M data providers or M2M data as a service. They are having device frameworks for Arduino, for all the different platforms, ARM, which you can. So you build your sensor, you download the device driver, you install it there. And then that device driver will actually interact with their cloud service, and then you get another API to withdraw the data from their cloud. And they also, Gemalto, for instance, also has the whole solution, and I'm pretty sure the other ones too, a way to kind of remotely update those devices. I read some amazing numbers that I don't know which company it was, but they updated a couple of million devices over 72 hours remotely.
Okay.
So those companies out there, there's a commercial stuff. For open source stuff, go to the Eclipse M2M group, who are building that kind of open source frameworks for M2M devices. They're also, the standard hardware for that kind of stuff usually is an Arduino platform.
Okay, great. So I'm just going to just kind of make a last call for questions. So if you had something on your mind that you didn't get a chance to ask yet, just fire it in through the chat stream or tweet it. I'm going to take one more that we got through email, and then so while Holger tries to answer this question, it's more of a design, so if it's not appropriate, that's fine too, but try to get your final questions in and we'll try to wrap up in the next few minutes. We're getting lots of people saying that they really appreciate your answers and the time, and they've really enjoyed it. So, thanks, Holger. This has been good, and lots of interaction. And thanks to everybody who's joined us. But a design question that we got from Arvind Kumar, who I hope is here, is stuck around. It's been a long time since we started. So, and it's a design question. So he says, at a design level, which layer needs to be designed first? Application, like appliances / things, or the middle layer, like API management. Changing application layer will be a pain over the period if it's embedded with hardware. However, it is difficult to design a universal API management system in one go that will suit all applications coming in the future.
Yes.
So we already know about SOA, where we can also achieve IoT. What is the real advantage of introducing an API management solution? So it's kind of a lengthy question, so hopefully...
Yeah. I think... I'm kind of stumbling over the term middleware, and the one thing which is missing
layer, he said, sorry.
Or middle layer, because the one thing which is actually missing is also the application, right? I mean, you have an application using data being sent by a thing or by sensors.
Yeah, he's calling the middle layer or application. He's using the term as one and the same.
So I think what you should start with, so there's an interesting conundrum, right? I mean, if you're putting an API client into hardware, and that API client is essentially not reliably updatable, right? You do have, we touched on that in the beginning, right? You do have the problem that most likely your application will evolve while your API client or your data feeder stays the same. So I would say, from what he mentioned, neither. What I would do is really I would take a hard look at the API, because the API is the contract between the application, this and all future applications, and the client feeding data into either getting data or feeding data into this. So the API really is the contract, and if you get that contract wrong, then no matter what kind of API management solution you put in there, if the contract goes wrong, you will get stuck. Okay. Ultimately. And I have unfortunately the scars to show. I'm sure there are a bunch of folks on the stream who remember the SOAP days, the WSDL days, how easy it was to write a very tightly focused schema, beautifully. You couldn't break out. It was validating every single input, etc. You put that out into production, and half a year later, it hits you that you pretty much put yourself in a straitjacket because you forgot to build in schema extension points, which allowed you to add new elements, for instance, to a SOAP message. Right. It's down to those, initial mistakes that you find yourself saying, okay, we just put out this great product, but effectively we can't evolve it anymore because we break all existing clients in the field, which we can't do. So we had to do another round of an API, which was more loose, yada yada, and became very quickly very ugly. So I guess the lesson from this is, don't forget all the lessons you have learned, all the battle scars you have learned through SOAP and SOA and RESTful APIs. Use those going forward. Create APIs which have change in mind, and build that contract, and then go your merry ways. One builds the client, one builds the application, and you will be fine. And don't worry, and if you want to have an application management, an API management platform, that's fine. But the API really is the contract. That's where you have to focus on.
Okay, great. It looks like Arvin is actually on the line, and he asks, do you have some case studies on IoT online?
Yes, I think we have. We have smart grid. We have connected home. There's a whole section in layer 7 which is it could be under M2M. I would have to check.
Yeah, we'll find those for you, Arvin, and we'll email them to you. How's that?
Yeah,
rather than
we have that.
through our resources.
Check out our data lens, which is kind of one of the first things we built specifically for IoT. I think that could be interesting. I do want to. Do we have more questions, or can I?
No, you can go. You can.
Okay.
Continue.
There's one more. There's one more topic, which I think it's kind of a made-up topic. We tend to, as IT guys, we kind of tend to live in our own little world, right? But if you kind of take a step back, there are three major trends, and I think they will ultimately create what I would maybe coin the fourth industrial revolution going forward. And we have actually the terminology in Germany is the fourth generation industry. I think there is something stirring. There is the maker community out there, the 3D printers, the Arduinos, the amazing creativity of decentralized, almost like enterprise type replicators, which have the potential to absolutely revolutionize supply chain and manufacturing. A world with industrial 3D printers will look radically. The economy of that kind of using that kind of tooling, where you don't need a supply chain because I can print out the parts I need right there on site, will look radically different than anything we have been used to for the last 150 years, which is essentially bigger and bigger companies. So that's the maker movement. I think there's something amazing going to come out of this, which is going to change economics. Then you have IoT, which is, in my mind, cloud, ubiquitous connectivity, sensor, big data, service-oriented architecture, massive scalability, unlimited compute powers, etc. That's the IoT. That's what we focused on now. But then you look on the other side and you see how even those old economy, manufacturing economy, the GEs, the GEs of this world, the Boeings of this world, etc., the Rolls-Royces of this world, Rolls-Royce aircraft engine of this world, they suddenly look a lot more like IT companies. GE is investing massive amounts of money into there's big data Silicon Valley lab, right? Bosch, for instance, who is just outside my home here, they now have a complete suite of a complex event processing, business processing, a cloud platform for their what they call IoTA platform. So they suddenly have tools in their arsenal, which we usually associate, with the IBMs, the HPs, the Oracles, etc. At the same time, you see IBMs, Ciscos, etc., moving into the industrial manufacturing direction, Internet of Everything, etc. So you see kind of this clash of industry, of two types of industry which have lived in happy coexistence for quite a while. Suddenly, GE and Bosch, for instance, are going. They understand that mastering big data is going to be a competitive advantage, and they're not looking at outsourcing that. They want to master that themselves.
That's interesting.
At the same time, you see the IT companies, trying to become relevant for those manufacturing companies, right? So I think we just see this kind of swirl of things which used to be kind of set, and you are there and I'm here, and things don't change much. They all kind of seem to, it just seems to be an upheaval in the world where everything which was certain suddenly becomes very uncertain. And I think that's not a bad thing. I think that's an exciting thing, because I think it shows the potential for change going forward, and IoT will be part of it. Maker movement will be part of it, and who knows? Maybe a GE will look a lot more like an IT company in a couple of years who builds smart things.
Right.
That's just as a meta comment to kind of put everyone, like, put a little bit of bigger picture on our discussion on protocols and standardization.
Right. Wow, that's interesting. Sort of scary in a lot of ways.
Change is good. The only constant is change.
This is true. This is true. No, well, that's great. So, thanks everybody for your questions. There was quite a few themes throughout the questions that we got early. M2M and IoT, some real security / privacy ones. There were some REST questions so if we didn't specifically ask your question, it was probably because I thought Holger sort of touched on it. Lisa from Elastic Path, if you're there, we didn't specifically answer your question, but we'll send you a shirt, because I think Holger answered it in another section of his talk. So,
but Stephen,
yes.
This is a topic I'm very passionate about. So you can go to my blog, write comments there, contact my email. Stephen, you can share with folks my email. You can reach me on Twitter. If there's specific areas and I can answer it, I'm more than happy to do that. Even if it costs me 2 beers over tonight.
Sure. Yeah. So you're 2 beers behind. You're gonna have a shot of Jägermeister to catch up. So Holger is just, this is his passion. He's interested in this topic, knows a lot about it. So you can reach out to him through his blog. Again, his Twitter handle is at HLGR360. So feel free to tweet him questions and comments. The Layer 7 blog, he's got, you can just click the Holger Reinhardt and all his posts will come up. So navigate your way to layer7.com, click or tap blog, and you can read all. He's got several posts on IoT. You can write comments, contact us through email, him through email. And I just want to say thanks to Holger, and thanks for everybody who participated. This was a great tech talk. Lots of questions, lots of participants, and I just want to say thanks, and thanks to Holger. All the way from Germany. My in-laws are coming into Vancouver from Germany probably as we speak. So
say hello to them.
I will. So thanks again, and thanks everybody. Arvin will get you those resources. We'll email them to you. The data lens stuff, I think we've got a solution brief around that Holger probably wrote.
Yeah.
So thanks again. Jose's off camera. Thanks, Jose, for making sure everything's working properly. Jose also designed the t-shirts. There's Jose, sorry for the jumpy camera. He designed the t-shirts, which are awesome, so look for those in the coming weeks and days. So thanks again, Holger, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Just maybe stay on the Skype for a minute after we shut down the stream, and I just want to say thanks personally.
Okay.
So thanks everybody. See you
Bye.
next time.
And reach out to me if you have questions.
Yes.